Okay, so this video is about the human respiratory system. So here's a great diagram showing the structures in the respiratory system labeled. All right, in gas exchange, we use that to refer to the physical method that an organism uses to exchange gases. Every respiratory surface, whether you're a fish and we're talking about a gill, or a human and we're talking about the alveoli, have to have these four characteristics. It has to be thin, it has to be moist, contact with the environment, and contact with the transport system. So thin, ours are super thin, okay? Think of a gill. They're kind of stacked, they're very thin. Moist, okay, must be in contact with the environment. Ours is in contact with the environment through the system of tubing to get into the lungs. Obviously, a gill, it's right on the outside, you can see it. It also must be in contact with the transport system. So you can see the blood vessels draped around the alveoli and the tubing heading down. Same with a gill. I'm sure you've all been fishing where you hook it and it gets bloody because it's very vascular. The nasal passages is where you want your air to enter. Yes, it does enter the mouth as well, but your nasal passages have a job. They have cilia and mucus that help to filter, so clean the air out. Think of your nose as a filter, moisten it, and warm the air. And when it enters the mouth, it doesn't necessarily get all of that. Okay. The pharynx is the throat region, right? It's just a fancy word for the throat. The epiglottis, we talked about this in the digestive system. It prevents food and liquids from entering the trachea. So you don't want to choke, right? So you did see that scanning, like an x-ray picture we watched of that little video. The larynx, that's a fancy word for the voice box. It's right here on the front. You can actually put your hands there while you're talking. You can kind of feel the vibrations there. It's made of cartilage. The trachea is the common name is windpipe. This carries the oxygen down to the bronchi, the first split. So look at the trachea, there it comes down, and then it's going to split into each lung by the bronchi. The trachea is made of cartilage rings. If you take your fingers and kind of feel down, you can feel the rings. That's cartilage. That's what that's made out of, just like your nose and your ear. Okay, then it's going to bronchites also referred to as the bronchial tubes once they're kind of like in the lungs. Sometimes you'll hear them referred to as the bronchial tubes. Deeper into the lungs, we now have towards the end the bronchioles, the branches coming off the bronchi, and they have the alveoli at the end. Like they're holding the like cluster of our respiratory surface, these little grape-looking structures. There are 350 million in each lung. We have so many of these. That's where actual gas exchange occurs. And you can see the arterioles, the venules, and the capillaries draped over there. The diaphragm, this is the muscle that separates the chest cavity from the abdomen. We're going to talk about it on the next slide. And the pleura, this allows the lungs to move freely. That's not in the diagram, but it's there for protection. It's two membranes, just like the pericardium with the heart. All right, so the medulla oblongata, this is part of the brain. It controls breathing rates by detecting high levels of carbon dioxide, okay, at chemoreceptors. So there's little receptors that detect that high CO2 and they're in the larger arteries, like the carotid artery, and then it gets the brain to start you to increase breathing. I always thought this was like a defect on the body. Why not detect low oxygen too? Well, carbon dioxide, when it mixes with water, it makes an acid, a carbonic acid. So if we have too much CO2, the pH of our bloodstream can turn acidic. But where this becomes an issue, if you go up in altitude, there's less oxygen. I'm sure you learned about this in earth science. So if your body isn't detecting low oxygen, they call it the narc effect. You kind of feel a little loopy, lightheaded. Some people, when they're hiking 8,000, 9,000, you would not even know. That's why Air Force pilots wear those masks. Okay, they're at high altitudes, and their body isn't going to tell them if they're low in oxygen to have more oxygen. Okay, inhalation versus exhalation. The diaphragm goes down and the chest expands out. So take a deep breath. The diaphragm is coming down and it's dropping the pressure and the air wants to rush in. And then this whole chest cavity expands. Exhale, okay. Diaphragm pushes up, push it, making the pressure, it wants to rush out, increasing the pressure so it rushes out. External respiration, that's gas exchange in the lungs with the alveoli, meaning the outside oxygen is getting in through that system of tubings, okay, the system of tubing, and then it goes in to the capillaries into the blood. And if you look internal respiration, now you take that gas exchange with the capillaries and now you've brought it to your body cells. And now we know why, right? We learned about the cell, the mitochondria, that powerhouse wants that oxygen with that sugar to make ATP. And that is now at a cellular level. That's what you're going to learn about in the second half of this unit. All right, the diseases and disorders. Now remember, the Regents gives us a couple with each body system, but there are so many more things that could occur with the respiratory system, but here are some common ones. Asthma. So a lot of my students over the years have asthma. It's common. It's an allergic reaction that causes wheezing, coughing, breathing difficulties because those bronchioles are going into spasm. There's different medicines you can take. You can have an inhaler, a steroid. Bronchitis. Now the lining of the bronchial tubes, meaning within the lung, the tubing, okay, becomes irritated and swollen. Emphysema. The lungs have lost their elasticity, okay? So see how these are dark? Those have lots of times smoking will be the precursor to emphysema. It's not always. One time I had a landlord in my 20s. He had worked in a steel mill his whole life in Pennsylvania, and little shards of steel were all in his lungs and had caused his emphysema. So here's healthy lungs, and this is what it looks like with emphysema. So this is not reversible, okay? Lots of times they end up on oxygen a couple times a week, and then maybe every day, okay? It's not reversible. Pneumonia, the alveoli fill with fluid. So now those little sacs, you're sick, okay, they start to fill with fluid, and you can die with pneumonia. You may hear about an elderly person passing from pneumonia. Lung cancer. Just like you have learned about other cancers, the cells are starting to grow uncontrollably and they do not work right. They form these little tumors, the tissue is not working correctly. Okay, and again, this can be caused by smoking, all right, and they're kind of showing the little tumors. The rest of this unit is now at a cellular level once the oxygen is at the mitochondria.